Hey, what's up guys? Exalted here, and in today's video what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you step by step how you can get to Champions League the easiest and most efficient way. Now, I know that Jarian just posted a video on this and I actually watched it, and in watching it, all his tips were very similar to mine. So what I did is I actually went ahead and redid a lot of my videos so that some of my tips are different and hopefully you can learn a few more new things. But really quickly, before we get into the video and all the tips that I have for you, I just created an Instagram and I would really appreciate it if you guys click the link in the description below and followed me. I'm going to be posting a lot of clips there, and there is also an imposter, someone that has also created an Instagram account, so make sure you're not following them. It's just at Exalted Fortnite, no underscore. And with all of that being said, let's get right into it. Really quickly, I'd like to announce that my amazing sponsor Pro Guides is adding a ton of new features to their site. This includes exclusive guide videos for pro members every single day. The Pro Pass now includes access to all games like Fortnite, League, and Smash Bros. And there's also up to 10 more free coaching passes for pro users. Finally, they're coming out with guides with 2 more World Cup players. Please click the link in the description below. So the first subject that I'm going to be talking about is going to be early game. Early game, in my opinion, is the most important part of a Fortnite match. If you die early game, you can't play late game. If you win early game, you have a chance to win the entire game. So when it comes to early game, you have to pick what spot you want to land. Now keep in mind, well, first of all, there's tons of spots on the map. There's places like Paradise, there's places like Tilted, which have tons of loot, but usually a lot of people will actually land there. And just keep in mind that I'm going to be having you guys play very safe throughout the entire game, so you really do not need very good guns to camp for placement points. So keep that in mind when deciding where you want to land. Now, once you have found maybe 1, 2, or even 3 locations that you want to start landing, get familiar with them. You want to land there very often whenever you can. Now, one suggestion, never land Hot Drop in Arena. Hot Drop is the first location where the bus, I guess, goes over. So if the first and closest location to the start of the bus path is Paradise, you're probably not going to want to go there because a lot of people will be there, and it'll just decrease your chances of winning that early game and making it to late game, which is insanely important. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with your early game is you do not need good guns. You are going to be camping that top 25 placement, at least for solos, and personally, I believe solos is the easiest way to get to Champions Division. The players are a little bit harder, but you get a lot more points for kills. You get 20 points per kill, as opposed to in trios, you actually only get 7 points for kills, so you do not progress as quickly. Personally, my favorite landing spots are actually Westworld, which is right outside of Paradise, and I also like Pleasant Park a lot. I usually don't find too many people there, but there's enough people in the beginning so that I can get maybe 1 or 2 kills to kind of boost my points. Now, if you cannot win early game fights, what you need to do is you need to find an undisclosed location, especially a place that does not have a name, so that you are most likely not going to be contested. The loot is really not a big deal because, like I said, you're going to be going for placement points. So I've had games where I walked out with just a gray pistol, and even one game where I walked out with an SMG and an AR with 20 bullets. All that matters is that you do not die early game and you have enough mats to make it to late game. It does not take a lot to get to late game. You do not have to contest people. All you really have to do is have enough mats to kind of camp and rotate to the next circles. And that brings us in to the ideal loadout. Your primary loadout is going to consist of a shotgun, an AR, hopefully impulse nades for really easy rotation and disengage mid game if you need it. It's also going to consist of mini shields, and then you have a flex spot. That final 5th slot you can use for bandages, or you can also bring something like a heavy sniper or maybe a proximity grenade, honestly, whatever you want to bring. But now that you guys have hopefully made it out alive during early game, whether it's because you ran away and you're playing really safe, or if it's because you have learned your landing spot very well by landing there very frequently and you were able to kill everyone else there. Whatever the reason, we're going to go ahead and get straight into mid game. Mid game is very interesting. Mid game is a perfect time to W key players and get a ton of points, but it's also a really risky time because you might get W keyed by other players and you might end up dying. Now, personally, the way I played it is I never ever took a single fight mid game unless it was a third party and there was a player one shot and I could get an easy snipe or something like that. My biggest tip is do not fight anybody mid game because it's super risky. You're practically gambling and hoping your opponent just isn't as good as you when you really do not know if they're better or worse than you are. So ultimately, when it comes to fighting mid game, I highly suggest you avoid it at all costs. If someone W keys you, hopefully you have impulse nades or some sort of disengage, if you do not have it and someone is W keying you, your best option is to W key them faster. If you notice that someone is pushing you, do not try to run away if you do not have disengage items. What you need to do is you need to build out, you need to get high ground on them, and usually they will box up and stay safe and they will stop engaging on you, and you can just box up on top of them and hopefully just hang out. Now, when it comes to mid-game fights that you are forced to take, you really want to play to your strengths. For example, if you're a creative warrior and you like 1v1ing your buddies very frequently, I highly suggest you take the build battle. Most players will take the build battle, and hopefully if you're good, you can kill them. Frequently, if you get high ground, they will drop down and box up. From there, you're good to go. They're not fighting you, you've got high ground, you can just box up and wait for the next zone. Now, if you're not very good at creative build battling and you have maybe really low ping, or you're just super good at box fighting, I highly suggest you kind of sit in your box, make a few boxes, and try to kill them through box fighting. If you have super low ping, like I said, they will not be able to take your walls. You should be able to take all of their walls and pull really nice edits on them. And if you guys want more tips on how to box fight specifically, I actually made a video with the 3rd place winner of the World Cup, Epic Whale, and he gives you some really good tips and tricks on how to successfully box fight. So when it comes to mid game, your goal is to not fight at all and just focus on rotation. But sometimes you have to fight, and when it comes to situations like that where you can't launch pad away or you can't use impulse nades to get away, all you really need to do is play to your strengths and give yourself the biggest opportunity of winning that fight. But there's a lot more to mid game. The most important part of mid game is rotating. When it comes to rotating, you always want to get an early rotation, and you always want to try to put yourself at the very middle of the circle. For those of you guys that do not know, if you're in center zone, you will always get the next zone, which means that you don't have to worry about rotating again. You can stay in your safe place, but if you also have the ability, rotate to that middle of the next zone. So always try to rotate to the middle of the next zone, because if you do, you will have pretty much a buffer of time for you to make your decisions. Now, once you have successfully made it to late game, late game, in my opinion, starts half in, half out zone. So for those of you guys who don't know what half in, half out zone, that is the first moving zone, kind of, where half the zone is in the circle and half the zone is out of the circle. Now, this is a huge point that will determine how well you do from the rest of the game. Once you have gotten to the half in, half out zone, you have most likely gotten your 60 points for making it to top 25. From here, I would usually have 1 or 0 kills. I do not push players, I'm just playing for this top 25. Once you get that 60 points, even if you're in the highest division outside of champions, you will still profit 10 points. So it's super important that you actually get this top 25. Once I would get top 25, there's a couple different things that you can do. One thing that I would sometimes do is once I got top 25, I knew I wasn't negative in points, and I would start W keying players in boxes because I'm a very strong box fighter. But if you're not quite as strong as a box fighter, or just another route that you can take that I would also frequently do, is you want to go for high ground. High ground is the easiest way late game to get placement points. Yes, it's really good for getting kills, but not as good as low ground if you're looking for kills. What you're going to want to do is when you get to half in, half out zone, you're going to want to go ahead and build a 1x1 almost as high as you can, only out of 1 material. Usually I end up building about 4 to 6 stories high, which sounds really high, but if you're building out of wood or brick, you most likely won't get shot down. But of course, be careful because you might get shot down, and just play that situation by ear. But you're going to want to start going for high ground during the half in, half out zone. Once you have high ground, you should have enough mats to do just floors and just pyramids and just stay on top in the sky. You usually don't have to worry about getting shot out, but try to keep yourself about 2 to 3 stories above the next highest level, if that makes any sense. So if people below you are 6 stories below you, you need to drop a little bit, or because of course you will die to fall damage. So try to stay just a little bit above whoever is closest to you on high ground, and you should be good to go. When it comes to high ground, it's like I said, the easiest way to get placement points. You don't have to worry about people really shooting you. You don't have to worry about box fighting while zones rotating. You can just get really easy zone rotations and really easy placement points, and of course check down very frequently, and hopefully you'll get a few kills or 2. The overall goal when getting to Champions League is that top 25 placement, because like I said, that is the safe zone where you have not lost points. You need to get that top 25 placement at all cost. Even if you have a terrible landing and you only have a great pistol, farm mats and make it to top 25. Now for the last tip, I'm going to be talking about what to do if you need to practice certain parts of your game, whether it's early game, mid game, or late game. When it comes to early game fights, you have to know your location better than the opponent to hopefully beat them. It'll give you a huge upper hand, and you will usually come out victorious if you know the location better than your opponent. So what I suggest you do if you're struggling early game is you can run into some public games and you can land in one spot and just W key all the players as soon as you possibly can, and then leave once the early game is over and just hop back in to early games as quickly as possible. Now, a couple tips that I can give you for winning your early game: you land and you find really good guns really quickly, what you can do is you can push your opponent as quickly as possible. Now, this is a really good strategy to practice, especially because of tournament games. When you get to your tournament games, time really matters. So you want to push those fights as early as possible, because if you do lose them, you didn't waste time and you have enough time to get yourself into another game. So if you have a good gun, know when your loadout is good and push your opponents as quickly as possible. To practice that, like I said, make sure you are dropping in public games, go to your landing spot and just push everyone early game. Once the early game is over, go ahead and leave and just start over. If you're struggling mid game, it's not because you're losing fights, it's because your rotations aren't good. So practicing mid game is probably the hardest thing to practice for a lot of players. If you find yourself dying mid game a lot, what you can do is you can go to pub games and just work on your rotations and try to find routes where you will not find as many players. But for the majority of people, your mid-game practice is just going to be by playing and kind of learning as you go. There's not much you can do. But if you're really good at winning fights, you will hopefully do better in mid-game, especially if you're getting W keyed by other players. Now, finally, endgame. Endgame is super important because it's your chance to get tons of points from placement or tons of points for kills, or sometimes even both at the same time. The best way to practice this is going to be running scrims. There are several scrim discords on every single region where you can run those, and you can also play Zone Wars. Zone Wars maps have gotten insanely realistic to endgames, where if you only want to practice endgame, I highly suggest just getting a group of really good friends, hopping into a Zone Wars game and just practicing as much as possible. It will really improve your tunneling and it'll improve your game sense when it comes to late game. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a thing or two from that, and I wish you the best when it comes to getting to Champions League. All you really have to do is just play safe, play for those placement points, and learn how to win your early game fights, and you should be good to go. But with that being said, if you loved the video, hit that sub button. If you liked it, hit that like button, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Peace out, guys.